The night the call was made, the streets around Britney Spears' home were unusually quiet. No traffic, no late night voices, just a distant hum of Los Angeles power lines stretching across the neighborhood like a thin electrical fog. Inside the house, most of the lights were off. Only the small lamp near the kitchen desk glowed softly, casting a pale circle across the floor. It was a kind of silence that arrives just before something shifts, too still to feel normal, too calm to trust. At 11:58 p.m., Britney's phone dialed 911. There was no pre-dial tone, no mispressed screen, no accidental call pattern. The system registered the number as manually entered, though the device logs showed no touch on the screen in the seconds leading up to the call. Operators later described the opening silence as structured, like someone was there but waiting for permission to speak. The line remained open for 3 long seconds before a voice finally reached the dispatcher, a quiet, trembling whisper that didn't match the voice they expected. The operator would later describe it as her voice, but too close to the microphone, and too far at the same time. The recording begins abruptly, as though mid-breath, with Britney saying only 2 words, "It's happening." The operator asked what she meant, if she was safe, if someone was in the house, but the next few seconds broke the structure of the call entirely. The system waveform, normally smooth, showed a jagged pattern as if 2 signals overlapped. A faint secondary sound entered the call. It wasn't speech. It wasn't static. It was something resembling a voice trying to form itself, caught between words and breath. The operator later testified that she heard someone else whisper near the line, but the recording retained no trace of it. The system captured Britney clearly. The second voice didn't imprint on the audio at all. The anomaly grew more unsettling when the dispatcher asked Britney who else was with her. A sharp intake of breath reached the line, almost too sharp. Then a thud echoed faintly, distant but present, like something falling to the floor in a room not quite connected to the one she was standing in. For a fraction of a moment, the background noise shifted, as if the call had moved to a different space entirely. The dispatcher would later describe the sensation as the acoustic shape of the room changing, but the system log told another story. 2 seconds into the thud, the call experienced what technicians called a soft collapse. The waveform dipped, flattened, and returned, but the voice data for those 2 seconds was missing. Not silent, missing. The 911 system log showed a gap marked with a small red flag rarely seen on recorded calls. Data anomaly, non-recoverable. When analysts tried to reconstruct the missing seconds using the device buffer, they found nothing but a faint harmonic tone, something like a breath stretched into a single, uninterrupted note. Then, suddenly, Britney's voice came through clearly, as if she had moved closer, whispering rapidly, "Don't let it in." The dispatcher asked who or what she was referring to, but Britney didn't respond. Instead, the line filled with a low, tremoring hum that seemed to shake the air on both ends. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't digital. Operators familiar with the electrical interference said it felt organic, like something exhaling near the microphone without producing words. And then the call broke, not disconnected, not ended by the caller. It simply fractured. The audio split into 2 layers, one audible, one silent. The audible layer recorded the operator calling Britney's name. The silent layer registered on the waveform as a perfect mirror of the operator's voice, but without sound. A ghost imprint of speech, shaped by frequencies no human ear could hear. When analysts later attempted to overlay the 2 layers, they discovered the silent mirror was delayed by a fraction of a second, as if something repeated the operator's words back at her, not simultaneously, but just slightly behind. At 12:04 a.m., the call abruptly terminated. The 911 system displayed no call ended icon. No caller hung up. The line simply stopped existing, as if the signal were cut from somewhere in the middle. Not at Britney's phone, not at the dispatch center, but in a space between them. When officers were dispatched to her home minutes later, they found the house quiet again. Too quiet. The kitchen lamp still glowed dimly. The phone lay on the floor near the counter, screen on. Dialing app open but frozen on a blank interface. The log showed that one final outgoing call attempt had been made at 12:05 a.m., just after the line dropped, but the phone never connected. No tower registered a signal. It was as if the device had tried to call into an empty network that didn't exist. The officers searched the home and noted nothing unusual. No signs of forced entry, no environmental disturbance, nothing out of place. Only the phone, lying perfectly parallel to the baseboard, as though set down intentionally rather than dropped. The official report omitted the anomalies. It described the call as inconclusive, citing panic, confusion, and emotional strain. But the 911 operator never accepted that version. She claimed there was a moment during the missing 2 seconds when she heard something impossible. Not a breath, not a word, a presence. One that didn't come from Britney's phone or the house or anywhere she could identify. And the most unsettling part wasn't what she heard, but what the system didn't record. In the days after the 911 call, the dispatch center quietly performed an internal audit, standard procedure for any emergency call flagged with a data anomaly. The goal was to determine whether the missing audio, the split waveform, and the sudden termination of the call were the result of a technical fault. But as technicians dove deeper into the system logs, the anomalies multiplied instead of disappearing. The first discovery was simple but unsettling. The 911 system had generated 2 recordings of the call, not one. This should have been impossible. Redundant backups exist, but they always mirror each other exactly. Here, the primary recording contained the 3-second silence, Britney's trembling start, the fractured hum, and the missing 2 seconds. The secondary recording, however, was shorter by almost 4 seconds. There was no technical reason for the discrepancy. The center's servers did not delete or trim calls. Both recordings should have been identical, and yet the second one ended earlier, truncating Britney's whisper, "Don't let it in," entirely. Even more disturbing, the shorter backup contained a half-second of audio not present in the primary file. A faint tonal pulse, too regular to be environmental noise but too irregular to be mechanical. When isolated, it resembled a low-frequency pattern similar to an infant's breathing, but slowed down tenfold. The waveform pulsed in 3 intervals before the backup cut out. When analysts compared it to the primary file, the pulse aligned exactly with the red-flagged non-recoverable section. It was as if the 2 recordings captured different slices of the same reality. That's when technicians noticed a third element, something hidden deeper in the logs. 3 earlier outgoing calls had been attempted from Britney's phone that same night between 11:52 and 11:57 p.m. None of them connected. None of them appeared on her device history, and none of them reached the dispatch center. Yet the phone registered the attempts internally. Each attempt lasted less than 1 second. Each attempt generated a timestamp without an audio stream, and all 3 attempts were marked with the same error code: endpoint unavailable, undefined origin. The phrase baffled analysts because it normally indicated a failure on the receiving end, not the caller's device. But the dispatch lines were fully operational at the time. There were no outages, no overloads, no routing failures. It was as if her phone had tried to call a dispatcher that didn't exist. The anomalies didn't end with the call logs. Officers returning to the home the following morning after the initial report brought along a digital forensic specialist to examine the router, hoping to determine if any unusual network activity occurred during the call. The router logs revealed something that, at first glance, looked like a normal sequence of Wi Fi drops, but each drop was exactly 21 seconds apart, forming a perfect pattern from 11:50 p.m. to 12:06 a.m. And at 12:04 a.m., precisely when the 911 call fractured, the router registered a signal loss pocket, not a disconnect, not interference, a pocket, an absence of signal within a signal, like a hole punched through the network for 1.7 seconds. The router continued transmitting normally, but the data passing through it temporarily ceased to exist. The forensic specialist had never seen anything like it. The logs behaved as if the house had been there and then not there for just over a second. When the technician attempted to sync the signal loss pocket with the 911 system's server logs, he found a chilling correlation. The lost pocket aligned perfectly with the silent mirror layer of the operator's voice, those milliseconds where the system recorded her words as shape but not sound. The router, the phone, and the dispatch center all experience a momentary absence at the same exact time, each capturing a different aspect of it. The house lost a fraction of its signal. The dispatcher lost a fraction of her voice. The phone lost a fraction of its connection. Three independent systems, failing in three different ways, synchronized to the same second. Then came the most disturbing finding in the entire audit. The 911 operator submitted a written supplemental statement 2 days after the incident. She had already given an initial verbal report, but after listening to the primary recording again, she felt compelled to document something she hadn't mentioned. She described the moment just before Britney whispered, "Don't let it in." During the missing 2 seconds, she didn't hear silence. She heard movement, not breathing, not voices. Movement. She wrote, "It sounded like someone walking, but not on a floor, more like footsteps made of air." She also noted that she heard Britney exhale sharply, as if startled by something close to her, but the recording captured none of this. The system logged no breath, no rustle, no ambient sound, only the hum, the distortion, and the erased seconds. When investigators returned to Britney's home, they examined the kitchen area again. The phone lay precisely where they had found it, screen still frozen, logs still corrupted. But this time, the technician noticed something odd. The lamp on the desk, still on, cast two shadows on the wall behind it, one sharp, one soft. The second shadow was faint, stretching at an angle inconsistent with the room's geometry, as if cast by a light source that wasn't there. The shadow disappeared when photographed. It existed only in motion, only in the moment, only within the eye, not the lens. This observation seemed unrelated until the forensic audio team overlaid the missing call segments with the hum captured in the backup. The hum's frequency dipped at one point, forming a shape in the spectrogram resembling a silhouette. Thin, bent, almost like a person leaning toward a microphone. It was nothing more than a pattern of sound, yet its resemblance to a human outline was uncanny. Analysts dismissed the visual interpretation as pareidolia, but they could not ignore the timing. The silhouette-shaped dip occurred exactly when Britney whispered her final words on the call. The correlation between sound, shadow, and missing data was undeniable. Something was present in the house during the call. something the human ear sensed, the operator perceived, and the machines tried but failed to record. And the most troubling element appeared when the forensic team examined the deletion logs for the backup file. The system showed that a maintenance script ran at 3:12 a.m. automatically without human trigger and flagged the backup as corrupt. But the script didn't delete the file. Instead, it attempted to rewrite the missing segments. The script failed, crashed, and restarted the system for that recording channel. This self-triggered repair only occurs when a file is incomplete in a structurally impossible way. Normally, corrupted files show missing bits, fragmented data, or checksum failures. This file showed none of those. It appeared intentionally erased, not damaged. The system behaved as though something interfered not with the recording, but with the moment itself. And this left investigators with an impossible question. If the system couldn't record what happened, then what exactly was happening in that kitchen between 11:58 p.m. and 12:04 a.m.? The more they examined it, the more one detail stood out. Britney didn't call for help because someone entered the house. She called because something arrived. When the forensic team finally gained access to the raw, unrepaired version of the deleted 911 backup file, they discovered something even the dispatch center hadn't noticed. The audio contained two parallel layers, each captured by the system at the same time, but only one meant to exist. The primary layer was familiar. Britney's fragmented breathing, her trembled warning, the soft collapse of the call. The secondary layer was almost entirely silent, except for one thing. It held a faint resonance that mirrored the operator's speech, but delayed by less than a quarter second. It was not an echo. It did not bounce from Britney's end. It did not originate from the dispatch center. It behaved like a shadow of the conversation, speech without sound, imprint without voice, a perfect outline of the operator's words, as though the system recorded not just what was spoken, but what something else in the moment heard. When the analysts aligned the two layers, the delayed imprint revealed patterns no ordinary echo could produce. The shadow layer began slightly before Britney whispered, "Don't let it in," and ended slightly after. But the most disturbing part was the middle, the missing 2 seconds. In the primary recording, those seconds were gone, replaced by the harmonic hum. In the shadow layer, those 2 seconds existed, but the imprint did not match anything spoken by the operator or Britney. The waveform formed a slow, rising curve, like a breath being pulled inward by something not bound to a human chest. And at the very peak of the curve, there was a subtle, dead space. A void of sound so thin it looked like a tear in the spectrogram. When enhanced, the void revealed an oscillation pattern similar to the tone captured in the router's signal loss pocket. 3 devices, 3 systems, 3 versions of the same moment, and all 3 showed a missing center, like the scene itself had been pushed aside. Meanwhile, the officers revisited the home with a more focused forensic approach. This time, they examined not just the phone and the router, but the physical environment. The kitchen counters, the floor, the lamp, and the chair Britney had likely been near during the call. What they found didn't align with their first assessment. The chair, originally thought to be in a neutral position, appeared moved, slightly angled toward the kitchen doorway, but the floor beneath it contained 2 faint scuff marks, parallel, smooth, as though the chair had been dragged just a few centimeters. None of the officers recalled touching it, and Britney, who was in no condition to move the chair during the call, could not have positioned it that way in the moments after. Next, they noticed that the small decorative bowl near the edge of the counter, which had been upright during their first visit, was now tilted, resting on its rim. Something had shifted it. Dust on its base formed a crescent pattern, consistent with sudden rotation, not slow contact. Objects do not spontaneously reorient themselves, yet two had, between their first and second arrival. But the strangest discovery was the kitchen window. During the 911 call, the dispatcher noted a faint, high-frequency tone she thought might be coming from outside. When investigators closely inspected the glass, they found an odd streak, thin, vertical, and slightly warped, as though heat had brushed against the surface. This distortion was only visible at a certain angle, and even then, only under the low ambient light. The streak started mid-pane and ended abruptly, not reaching the top or bottom, like something had leaned inward, but not with a body or a hand. More like a field of air pressing close, then releasing. No fingerprints, no smudges, just a single line of bending light. When technicians tested the glass for residue, they found nothing. But when they checked the temperature logs from the environmental sensors in the home's security system, they found a dip in the room's ambient temperature at 12:04 a.m., matching exactly the moment the call fractured. The dip lasted only a second, but the streak on the glass aligned with the same moment. The more data they collected, the more the house itself seemed to remember the event even when the devices failed. A bowl rotated, a chair shifted. The window bent light for just an instant. The lamp cast two shadows when it should have cast one. Then investigators found something they didn't expect. On the kitchen desk, beneath a stack of unopened mail, they discovered a small notepad. Most pages were blank, except for a pencil-written note on the third sheet. The writing was faint, hurried, and slanted sharply to the right. As if done under tension, the note read, "The room is smaller tonight." The handwriting matched Britney's. The timestamp in the corner, accidental pressure from a smartwatch, read 11:43 p.m., 15 minutes before the call. A separate line, lower on the page, was scribbled with downward strokes. "It's shifting again." Investigators initially assumed the notes referred to emotion, anxiety, or the stress of isolation. But when compared to the router's logs, specifically the 21-second interval drops, they found a pattern. Each Wi-Fi drop aligned within seconds of the times when the smart home sensors briefly spiked in pressure readings, as if the air density in the room subtly changed. Environmental shifts, perception changes, lines written in the moment, not interpreted later. It painted a picture not of fear, but of recognition, as if Britney had experienced something similar before. The forensic specialist reviewing the 911 backup noticed a peculiar anomaly as well. When overlaying the shadow layer onto the main audio file, they observed a small rhythmic oscillation hidden beneath the hum. The oscillation repeated in threes: 3 pulses, then silence, 3 pulses, then silence. When slowed down, the pulses resembled a primitive form of articulation, something repeating its own breath pattern not to communicate, but to exist. Then came the revelation no one wanted to confront. In the final milliseconds before the call fractured, the waveform did something unprecedented. It folded. The top and bottom edges of the spectrogram bent inward, creating a shape not seen in audio analysis, almost like two sides of a page being pressed together until they met in the center. Analysts couldn't explain it. Machines don't fold sound like that. Signals don't compress in symmetrical arcs, unless something interfered with the physical space around the microphone, unless the moment itself twisted. As more inconsistencies emerged, it became clear. The anomalies in the audio weren't glitches. The shifts in the room weren't coincidences. The missing seconds weren't errors. They were symptoms. signs of something passing through the environment, too quickly to see, too quietly to hear, but strong enough to leave fingerprints on machines that couldn't interpret what touched them. And Britney's whisper, "Don't let it in," suddenly felt less like fear and more like experience. When officers returned to Britney's home for the third time, this time accompanied by a specialized technical unit, they expected to find the same quiet, undisturbed rooms they documented earlier. But the moment they stepped inside, something felt subtly different. Not visibly, not physically, but atmospherically. It was as though the air in the house wasn't resting, it was waiting. The kitchen lamp still glowed in its soft amber circle, but the shadows it cast were no longer symmetrical. The second faint shadow noted earlier had shifted to a slightly different angle, even though neither the lamp nor any object in the room had moved. The technician took multiple photos, expecting to capture the anomaly. But once again, the second shadow refused to imprint onto the lens. It existed only in the natural eye, only in motion, never in a still frame. This time, however, the officers did find something that hadn't been there before. The smart home clock on the counter, previously synced and accurate, now showed a time 4 minutes behind the rest of the house. Its internal adjustment logs marked a brief desynchronization event at 12:04 a.m., the exact second the 911 call fractured. Smart clocks do not spontaneously unsync themselves without external interference. Yet the device insisted it had recalibrated due to temporal offset inconsistency, a phrase the manufacturer confirmed should never appear unless triggered manually by a developer tool. No one in the house had such a tool. No one in the responding team had access to the clock's internal code. The technician moved next to the living room to check the security cameras. Brittany's home had 3 active indoor cameras, one in the hallway, one by the entry, and one overlooking the living room. She rarely used them, but they recorded continuously to a cloud backup. The night of the incident, all cameras were functioning, all had power, all had stable Wi-Fi, and all 3 contained the same 14-second gap. From 12:03:52 a.m. to 12:04:06 a.m., there was nothing, not black screen, not corrupted footage, nothing, pure absence. 14 seconds removed entirely from the video stream, replaced with placeholders, the cloud system marks as no event data. This was not a glitch. Camera glitches freeze frames or create pixel blocks or smear colors. These files did not freeze. These files simply did not exist. And when technicians pulled the metadata, they found something more disturbing. Each camera performed a simultaneous recalibration ping. At the exact millisecond the footage ended. Cameras do not recalibrate themselves unless commanded to by the server, yet the server log indicated no such command. Instead, the cameras behaved as though the timestamp they were recording suddenly became invalid, like the moment they were trying to capture was no longer available to be captured. When the officers returned to the kitchen, they noticed another change. The bowl that had previously been tilted on its rim was now upright again, but in a different location, shifted roughly 6 inches to the right. The crescent dust mark beneath it indicated it had rotated and slid, but no one recalled touching it. And the house's vibration sensors recorded no movement strong enough to shift objects on a counter. Then came the discovery that changed the investigation's direction entirely. Inside the dispatch center, the 911 operator who had taken the call, still visibly shaken, submitted a second confidential note to her supervisor. The note was not included in the official report. It was handwritten, folded, and stored in a private file that the forensic team later accessed only because a supervisor believed something unusual had occurred during the call. The operator wrote, During the missing seconds, I didn't just hear movement, I felt something listening on the line. Not someone, something. She described a moment of intense pressure in her left ear, as though the headset tightened against her skull. She said the sensation felt like the air grew denser, and that she had the overwhelming impression of a presence leaning into the call. Not from Britney's side, but from somewhere between the lines. The most chilling sentence in her note was underlined twice. For a moment, I think it was hearing both of us. The forensic audio team, upon reading this, cross-referenced the operator's statement with the shadow layer imprint found in the deleted backup. The delay between the operator's voice and the silent imprint matched not the speed of reflection, but the average human reaction time, roughly the time it takes for a listener to hear, interpret, and attempt to replicate speech. The shadow layer was not an echo. It was a response, muted, attempted, incomplete. As investigators pieced together this new evidence, they returned to Britney's home one last time, not to search, but to observe. They placed small monitoring devices in various rooms: air pressure sensors, thermal readers, electromagnetic detectors, and narrow band microphones. They expected to record nothing. For 40 minutes, they did. Then, at 11:58 p.m., the exact minute the call was made the night before, the kitchen's narrow band microphone captured a faint modulation in the air. Not a voice, not a hum, more like the tension of a room shifting its weight, settling into a shape that didn't belong to it. The pressure sensor recorded a small dip. The thermal sensor picked up a brief, circular cold patch, lasting less than half a second. The pattern repeated 21 seconds later, the same interval as the router's drops. It repeated again and again until 12:04 a.m. At that exact moment, the sensors caught nothing. No shift, no dip, no sound. Just a flat, absolute stillness. A silence so complete that even the ambient room noise vanished, as though the air itself had been removed. Scientists later called this impossible. Rooms do not lose all ambient noise. Every space has sound, even silence has texture. But the recording captured a moment where texture ceased to exist, a missing slice of the environment, just like the missing audio, just like the missing frames, just like the missing seconds. Something hadn't interrupted the night. It had taken part of it. The forensic team spent nearly a week working on the deleted backup file from Britney's 911 call. At first, they believed the file was too incomplete to yield anything meaningful. But when they applied narrow band spectral recovery, normally reserved for aviation accidents and submarine audio, they detected a single surviving fragment, buried so deep in the noise floor that most systems ignored it automatically. The fragment lasted 0.4 seconds. At normal speed, it sounded like nothing more than a faint tremor, similar to the hum already present in the call. But when slowed down by a factor of 40, the fragment widened, revealing shape, not words, not speech, but pattern, a pulse, a resonance, then something close to inhalation. It wasn't Britney, it wasn't the operator, it wasn't mechanical, and most disturbingly, it did not match the room acoustics of Britney's kitchen. Forensic software compares resonance, fingerprints of spaces. Every room has a unique signature. The recovered fragment reflected a space that was larger, with deeper reverberation than any room in the house, as if the sound originated somewhere else entirely. The analyst who ran the test described it quietly in his report. This resonance doesn't belong to the environment, it belongs to the event. But the event, as they understood it, had no physical presence. No person entered the home, no device malfunctioned normally, No object could produce a pattern this distinct. Yet there it was, zero point 0.4 seconds of recorded impossibility. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the internal home logs, the same logs that had revealed the router's 21-second interval drops. They found something even stranger. Between 11:40 p.m. and 12:10 a.m., the home's internal clock adjusted itself 9 separate times, each by less than a second, not forward, not backward, sideways. Micro corrections that should only happen during major software updates or after a power outage. But no outage occurred and no update was pushed. The micro corrections formed a shape, a curve, a wave, a pattern matching the dips in the 911 audio, as if the home were trying to stay synchronized with something else. Something that wasn't synchronized to time as humans experience it. When the technicians overlaid the house's micro corrections with the dispatch center's log failures and the operator's headset compression events, they uncovered something chilling. All of the anomalies peaked at the exact same millisecond, 12:04:02.761 a.m. Different systems, different networks, different physical locations. One moment, it was a moment when silence replaced everything. The moment the cameras failed, the moment the shadow on the wall appeared, the moment the call fractured, the moment something arrived or passed through. Investigators then turned to Britney's behavior in the days leading up to the call. While the official narrative painted her as stressed and withdrawn, the raw notes from her personal assistants told a more peculiar story. She had complained that certain rooms in the house felt tight, as if the walls leaned inward, not figuratively, but physically. She avoided the kitchen at night, saying she heard patterns, not noises. Patterns like someone pacing inside the walls. 3 days before the call, she told a friend on the phone that the house kept resetting whenever she walked from the living room to the hallway. The friend assumed she meant she was dizzy or disoriented. But Britney clarified, "No, not me. The house resets, like it blinked." These remarks were dismissed as emotional stress. Now, in the context of the anomalies, they were re-evaluated. The forensic timeline team compiled all available data: audio, electrical logs, environmental sensors, handwritten notes, and the narrow band recovery of the deleted tape. When plotted on a single axis, the events formed a repeating pattern: approach, distortion, collapse, silence, withdrawal, 5 stages, 5 behaviors, 5 signatures across multiple systems. Not mechanical, not environmental, not psychological, a phenomenon. Every collapse in the timeline showed the same characteristics: the environment bending, not breaking around a focal point. In one section of the analysis, the lead technician wrote, "This pattern resembles gravitational lensing in audio form, like something passed close enough to distort the medium, but not enough to leave a trace." This was the closest anyone came to explaining the 0.4-second fragment. When mapped visually, the resonance resembled a funnel, narrow at the top, widening downward, then abruptly cut off. The shape matched the micro-corrections in the home's clocks, the router's signal loss pocket, and the operator's silent voice imprint. It also matched a scribble Britney had written hours before the call. The investigators found it in the same notepad where she wrote, "The room is smaller tonight." On the next page, drawn in hurried strokes, was a crude funnel shape, widening downward, with 3 short lines beneath it, like footsteps falling out of nothing. Beside it, circled twice, were 3 words: "It's close now." The final breakthrough came when one of the audio specialists aligned the recovered 0.4-second fragment with the main 911 call. When placed at its proper position within the missing 2 seconds, The waveform aligned almost perfectly with the operator's reported sense of a presence listening. The fragment sat exactly between Britney's breath and the operator's question, as if something stood between them, receiving both sides of the call. Not relaying, not interfering, receiving. It was the only moment in the entire investigation where every system, audio, visual, network, physical environment, collapsed into one coherent point. 12:04:02.761 a.m. A moment too short to be described as intrusion, too structured to be random, too precise to be accidental. Something had shaped the environment not through force but through existence, brief, immense, and misaligned with the physical world. And investigators realized this was not the call's consequence, it was the call's origin. Brittany didn't reach for her phone because she was afraid of someone. She reached for it because she felt something coming. The same something that left a shadow the camera couldn't see, that made a room collapse inward, that bent light on glass, that walked without weight, that listened without sound. And when she whispered, "Don't let it in," the timeline proved she wasn't warning the dispatcher. She was warning the moment. As our investigators gathered the final pieces of data, audio fragments, pressure dips, microsecond clock shifts, missing frames, deleted logs, a single truth became undeniable. The 911 call was not the beginning of the event. It was the midpoint. Something had been building long before Brittany picked up the phone. Something subtle at first, rooms that felt smaller, air that seemed too still, shadows bending where they shouldn't. Yet on the night of the call, all of these threads converged into one impossible moment. To reconstruct that moment, forensic analysts layered every recorded anomaly on a single timeline. The router's interval drops, the home clock's microcorrections, the audio hum spikes, the visual streak on the glass, the operator's headset compression, the camera's missing 14 seconds, and the zero point 0.4 to zero point 0.2 second resonance fragment inside the deleted tape. Individually, each anomaly seemed like technical glitch. Together, they formed a structure, a pattern of approach and withdrawal, a distortion in the room's geometry, a collapse of recording systems that should never fail simultaneously. The reconstruction revealed that at 12:04:02.761 a.m., the environment inside the kitchen did something physically impossible. It folded, not inward, not outward, but through itself, as if two versions of the same room briefly overlapped for a fraction of a second, and all the systems trying to capture it simply broke under the contradiction. This explained the shadow that couldn't be photographed, the chair that moved without force, the bowl that rotated against friction, the glass that bent light without heat, and the missing audio that existed in one system but not another. The environment didn't distort because something entered it. The environment distorted because something passed through it, intersecting the physical world for just long enough to leave impressions, but not long enough to stay. When analysts overlaid the zero point 0.4 second recovered fragment into the timeline, it fell exactly into the missing center of the call, the place where Britney's whisper turned into sound shaped like fear. The fragment began with a long inhalation, deeper than a human chest could produce, followed by a resonance curve that resembled neither speech nor breath. It was simply presence, dense, heavy, and occupying a space the room had not prepared for. The shadow layer in the audio, the silent imprint of the operator's words, matched the moment of approach, as if something listened from the wrong side of reality, hearing both voices with a delay caused not by distance, but by difference. Every recovered data point revealed the same terrifying geometry, an event moving not through space, but through possibility, brushing against the physical world only long enough to change how the environment behaved. It did not belong to the room. The room briefly belonged to it, and Britney felt it coming. Her final whisper, "Don't let it in," was not a plea to the dispatcher. It was a plea to the moment she sensed forming around her, a moment she had experienced in fragments before. Rooms tightening, clocks hesitating, shadows lengthening without cause. The subtle impression of being watched by something that had no eyes. Investigators compared Britney's handwritten note, "It's close now," with the final audio layer of the deleted tape. The resonance pattern at the end of the fragment showed a drop in frequency, like the last echo of something withdrawing from the physical world, leaving only the faintest shape in the air before fading completely. The reconstruction ended with the house returning to absolute stillness, a stillness so complete that even ambient noise flatlined for 0.12 seconds. Rooms do not fall silent like that. Air does not stop vibrating unless something has taken the vibration with it. The technicians had no name for this event. Scientists offered no model. The official report rejected every anomaly. But the raw data, untouched and undeniable, revealed one final alignment: the recovered audio fragment, the shadow layer delay, the missing seconds, the erased frames, the pressure dips, the cold patch, the desynchronization, and the collapsed sound texture all converged into a single shape. The same funnel silhouette Britney had drawn hours before the call. A narrowing, a pulling, a moment collapsing inward. A fleeting contact with something that did not belong to the world we understand, but brushed against it long enough for the machine to panic and for a human voice to register fear that words cannot describe. When investigators closed the case months later, the final line of the unofficial internal summary, written quietly by the lead forensic analyst, read, "We did not lose the recording. The recording lost the moment." And beneath it, in smaller handwriting, whatever was in the kitchen at 12:04 a.m. was never meant to be heard.